for all of us that Israel and Palestine is in our hearts. As for the Europe, if you all know the rule of a shelf, don't you? If you put up a shelf, then blink 4 times and it's full of books. If you didn't put it up, the books probably wouldn't appear. Have a parliament and you have laws. The more parliaments you have, the more laws you have. So we've gone from having one parliament to having several. We have the European Parliament, we have the Welsh Assembly, we have the Scottish Assembly. I feel sorry for the Scottish and Welsh people because they're not only suffering from English law or British law, they're suffering from European law, Welsh law and Scottish law. And let's face it, we can't go on with this. This continual plethora of legislation is killing us. Having said that, it doesn't mean to say I'm anti-European. I've lived in Germany and I've lived in France. I speak French and German. I love Europe and go there frequently and spend a lot of time there. I love meeting people. To say that the European Union has gone too far doesn't mean you're anti-European. It means to say we need to change.
Carol.
The Green Party does believe that we should be in Europe. We believe that, but we don't believe that it means that we have to give up an identity, although I think probably if you asked everyone in this room, they probably all have a little bit of a different idea as to what that identity was. But, you know, Europe is important and it's going to be increasingly important because there are big issues such as climate change which we simply can't deal with ourselves. However, we do have some concerns about Europe. We think that there's too much of a pro-business neoliberal agenda, and that has affected how effective Europe has been able to be on this vital issue. So we think it's important that we're in Europe. We think it's important to have Greens in Europe, and we will continue to push for very strong legislation in areas such as climate change.
Tom.
I don't know if you know about the piece of research last year about King George activities. It was celebrated more by the immigrant population than it was by the indigenous British population. Do you know about that piece of research?
No.
Well,
it doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't surprise me. I feel British. I was born here, this is my country, I have British values. I celebrate St George's Day. You know, my husband's a West Point grad, a military academy grad from the US, and their mantra is duty, honour, country. And as geeky as it sounds, I don't know why we can't have something similar here. I don't know why we're scared of Europe. Europe has allowed us to export 20%, more than 20% of our goods. It makes us strong in the world. It allows us to bargain. It allows us to punch above our weight. 1 million of our British people are living in Europe right now. I mean, it gives us lots of opportunities, so I don't think we should be scared of it. It's just the Parliament. There's legislation that I'm fighting against right now that we can change in Europe. It's just the Parliament.
I think we have a question over here. It won't be much, probably maybe the last one over here.
Is there a question over there? Follow-up questions?
What's been said, please?
Follow what's been said, or is it new?
There's somebody just back here first.
Okay.
My question doesn't have much to do with what has just been said, but I wanted to direct a question at Lee Scott, but I'd like to hear everyone else's opinion on it as well. I wanted to ask Lee Scott why he's a member of Conservative Friends of Israel and why he supports Israel when it's an apartheid state and it oppresses Palestinian people. Thank you.
I'd be delighted to answer that question. I'm a member of Conservative Friends of Israel and proud to be so. Israel is the finest democracy in the Middle East, indeed the only democracy. I pray for peace on all sides in the Middle East. I personally hope that there will be a two-state solution, but it must be an end to terrorism against innocent Israelis by terrorist organisations. I will never bow my head on that. I will never curtail my opinion on that, no matter what is done to try and divide our community. Please take note and write that down. Thank you.
Do others wish to answer?
There's a lot of misconception about Israel and Palestine. I go every year to Israel and Palestine. I have Israeli friends and Palestinian friends. I spent many months on the West Bank learning Arabic. Somebody said to me, when you've been in Israel for a week, you think you can write a book. When you've been there for 3 months, you think you can write a chapter. When you've been there for 20 years, you know you can barely write a line. And the problem is so rich, it's full of cliches. There's been faults on both sides, and those sides continue. I know that my average Israeli friends, my average Palestinian friends would dearly love to see a just solution. And yet there's so many impediments that go back so far. Just to give you one example, in 1948, when it all started, the Israeli or the Jewish element organised itself before and during the partition process. 24,000 Jewish people signed up to join the Jewish army. Do you know the Muslims outnumbered, the Arabs outnumbered the Jews by at least 2 to 1. Only 1,000 Palestinians did the same. There's a cause of the Palestinians. The problems are so rich, there's so many. We need to fight for peace there, but we need to fight for security. Another one of the cliches. Jews have been driven out of almost every Arab country. Jews have been driven out. One of my closest friends is a Tunisian Jew, and he was driven out and could take nothing with him from that country. When you talk of the right to concern, what about the rights of those Jewish people? We have to also go to say, do you know the biggest villain in the Middle East is Abdul Nasser. He caused the war of 1967. He played with himself and his ego and created the situation that led to that division. And if it hadn't been for that stupid, vile man, we wouldn't have the situation we are today. And he's an Arab. The Arabs have let the Palestinians down more than anybody else.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't want this to turn. Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you. I don't want this to turn into. Hang on. I'm talking. I'm the chairman here. I do not want this to turn into an attack on people here who are not here, who cannot answer, and therefore that is wrong to form an attack on them. I was upset, Lee, that you actually did attack the BNP. They're not here to answer that attack, but the rest are. So therefore, you know, and I think the same thing is happening now in the situation in Israel, which is a very complicated situation, and therefore to single out certain people is not right to do, and all it's going to do is cause problems. So with that in mind, you know, I'm happy to move on, but if you do want to answer the question, do that without...
Sure. I want to say that point actually myself. Sorry, I didn't catch your name, young lady. Maria. I have been to West Bank myself. I have a Jewish father, I said earlier on. I speak Arabic, I have read Quran. I have been to many Palestinian demonstrations. The war we have in the Middle East is not the war between Israelis and the Palestinians. It's the war between superpowers. Greedy people who make money out of the humanity. War is the vestige, remnant of the wildness of our ancestors. War doesn't solve anything. The war we have is a fight for profit by the arms industry. They are using the two people, okay? On this ground, to label one side terrorist, the other not terrorist, is not right. War, whoever watches it, is wrong on humanity. On humanity, we should solve this problem without any bias to any side. One time terrorist could be a hero another time. I was incarcerated being terrorist when I was not, when I was fighting for democracy. People who fight for their right should not be labeled as terrorists. Terrorism could come also from states. We have seen it all. Okay? On this ground, we as a democratic society, we in the Great Britain, we should always fight for unbiased, democratic, humane solution, be it inside or outside DK, without any labeling. That's what I want to say.
You've asked a question, haven't you? Yes. No? Didn't you? Okay. Time is getting on, so if we can have the questions, sure.
Can we hear answers from the other panel members on that?
If they want, it wasn't actually directed at them, but I don't know if they will want to answer or not. It's up to them. Give them the choice.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a point.